The national budget being scrutinized. Let's dissect where the billions go through and where do they end up. Good morning. I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno, and this is At the Forefront. Billions of pesos in budget insertions in the last 19th Congress are about to be scrutinized. The flood control scandal deepens as questions of Senate integrity surface, with talks of almost all senators being implicated. How will this investigation end up? Will the revelation demand full accountability? With us is a staunch advocate against corruption, former Audit Commissioner Heidi Mendoza. Good morning, Commissioner Heidi. Kamusta ka na?
Good morning, Atty. Karen, and good morning sa viewers and listeners ng iyong programa. Okay naman, medyo hindi nakaka-recover yung voice.
Commissioner Heidi, nasa probinsya ka pa rin po ba hanggang ngayon?
Nasa Manila.
Nasa Manila po, okay. At bakit po tila tahimik kayo at umiiwas sa mga interviews?
Actually, hindi naman. It just so happened na nagkaroon ako ng problema in terms of yung aking voice and aking persistent na cough. Kaya gusto ko sanang mag-break. Kaso ang hirap mag-break dahil ngayon nagkakaroon ng perception na namimili ka ng nagpapa-interview. Actually, hanggat kaya nating pagbigyan, pinagbibigyan naman.
Okay. And as someone po na galing sa Commission on Audit, can you explain to us, ano po ba ang role ng COA once na may binigay na budget sa isang department?
Siguro hindi lang yung binigay na budget. Kasi yung Commission on Audit ay of course, ito yung conduct of review, audit, and then investigation din ng both sides, revenue and collection, as well as disbursement of funds. Kasama din sa atin yung prevention of irregularities. Kasi kami yung nag-i-issue ng accounting and auditing rules, regulations, and procedures, di ba? Now, kailangan nating i-explain na bago natin tingnan yung sino-sino ba yung nagbabantay, mainam na ilagay natin, situate natin kung nasaan ang COA. We have the so-called, Atty. Karen, we have the so-called 4 lines of defense. The first line of defense, ito yung mga process owners. Diba? Kung sino yung gumastos, syempre sila yung nasa unahang linya ng defense. Yung mga nag-encode, yung mga nagtatype, yung mga naggagawa ng report, etc. The second line is, of course, the supervisory line. And then the third one is the internal audit. Tapos, saka pa lang Commission on Audit. Siyempre, ang expectation natin ay all the lines of defense are working. And therefore, the Commission on Audit can just effectively do the expectations and the responsibilities being the fourth line of defense, the external audit. Not to mention that the type of audit that we're doing is, of course, external and it's supposed to be a post-audit approach, meaning bayad na yung transaction, saka natin ino-audit. And many are saying, ba't ganun? Kasi nga pang fourth line of defense yan. At kahit saan natin tingnan, ang protection ng public funds, parati ang responsibilidad, kaunang responsibilidad nung head of agency, nung naghahawak ng pera. But since your question is specifically on the budget, basically, syempre, pag mag-o-audit ang Commission on Audit, tinitingnan din natin kung nagwo-work ba yung existing internal controls. Ayan. So that we have to rely on the work of the internal audit. We have to rely on the assurance nung internal audit, nung kanilang risk management process. And then, yun din, titingnan natin kung nag-ooperate ba at nag-i-exist ba, maayos ba, effectively bang nag-ooperate ang mga tinatawag nating budgetary controls. So, ayan. Kung yung audit ay naging maayos at maraming tao na nasa COA para makapagawa ng audit dahil ngayon nga ay kulang na kulang, dapat ang audit nag-start talaga sa budget, di ba? Aalamin mo yung resources, ang galing. So, ito nga yung nabanggit ko kagabi, na tinitingnan natin kung sa appropriation pa lang, hindi ba na-exceed yan. So kung ganun yung naging approach, di sana nakita na natin yung mga problema sa insertions. At nagamit na natin ito as a red flag para mag-conduct tayo ng fraud audit.
So you're saying, Commissioner Heidi, dapat baguhin yung sistema, dapat may pre-audit?
No. I'm not saying na dapat may pre-audit, na baguhin ang sistema. What we're saying is, kailangang i-review yung approach in the sense na kailangan mag-start ulit doon sa assessment ng budgetary controls. But since you mentioned pre-audit, and let me shed a light a bit, ako personally, hindi ako masyadong sa pre-audit dahil yun nga, ang aking description diyan it is a punishment for those who are honest and a reward for those who are corrupt. You know why I'm saying that? Kasi kung corrupt ka, pre-audit yan bago makakolekta ang contractor, kailangan auditin. Di walang kaligtas-ligtas, di ba? Talagang sila magbabayad. Tapos sa post-audit, gano'n na naman. On the other hand, yung mga masisipag naman, pagod na pagod. Kasi yung mga management action, tinatawag nating dapat management ang gumagawa niyan. At hindi nag-i-interfere ang Commission on Audit. Sa dami nga ng trabaho na rin, di ba? Di nadodoble yung trabaho. However, with this happening na ang lakas ng loob at mukhang nag-breakdown, mukhang hindi nagtrabaho yung first, second, third line of defense. So naging napakabigat ng role ng COA. Siguro, we may have to resort to the so-called selective pre-audit. Hindi lahat ipi-pre-audit, pero isi-select natin yung may pinakamataas na risk. For example, yung mga tinatawag natin ganyan, capital project. But I would like to introduce a little twist, A little twist. Kasi, kahit na magdagdag tayo niyan, kung hindi natin maaayos yung takbo ng sistema at mababago yung kultura, mai-improve ang oversight, wala. Additional resources, additional pagod, we may end up with the same result. So ano ang ating nire-request? Kung halimbawa magkakaroon ng selective pre-audit, pagkatapos, may citizens participation doon sa tinatawag nating okay, bago mo bayaran, meron kang inspection. At nakita natin sa existing nila, merong quality assurance na unit sa DPWH. May inspectorate team, di ba?
Yeah.
Pero parehas na hindi gumana, Kaya talagang yun na-compromise yung tinatawag nating control system. So in that case, kung magkakaroon ng selective pre-audit, para masiguro natin na may oversight, we would have to invite the presence of yung tinatawag nating citizen volunteers. Halimbawa, may engineer dyan. Ang ating appeal ay for the professional organizations. Kailangan nating magtulungan. Yung mga architect, tingnan ka agad, ano ba ang standard design ng isang flood control? Ano yung standard costing? Then we ask the private sector, the businessmen, baka naman gusto niyong mag-donate ng isang sistema na magmo-monitor ng prices and then gagawing online so that citizens can, di ba? Para bago mo bayaran, alam mo na tama ang estimate, tama yung presyo, and may representative yung, kunyari, the Philippine Institute of Civil Engineers o United Architects of the Philippines and even the Philippine Institute of Certified Public Accountants para, teka muna, inspectionin natin. Therefore, hindi kayang mag-connive nung kasi merong representative ang mamamayan. Tsaka masyadong marami yung naandun na, kumbaga, kailangan mong di ba? So in this process, ini-improve natin yung oversight. Kasi the system as it is already embedded with existing controls. They are, I would say, effectively designed. However, they are not effectively operating.
Yeah,
and therefore, we have to strengthen the oversight. Paano? Participation of professional groups. Bakit professional groups? Kailangan yung professional groups ang bibet. Ikaw, halimbawa, ay Zamboanga to. Flood control ng Zamboanga. Perhaps pick pa Zamboanga can say, okay, sino ang contractor? Alam nila kung sino yung contractor and therefore, pwede mong screen. Teka, itong ating engineer na ito, hindi yan, wala siyang relationship dito sa You can even go as far as, yung ating pick pa doon sa ibang chapter para talagang meron tayong tinatawag na assurance ng independence, di ba? And when we talk of cost, kasi syempre magkakaroon ng cost, lilipad, pupunta, mamamasahe, ang sa atin, Karen, di ba? 30% na nga lang daw, sabi nila, ang naiiwan sa project
pagka
Kung
mga
gusto
flood
natin
control,
maging 100%
especially.
yan, mag-alat lang tayo ng sabihin nating 10% or 1% sa cost of oversight para magkaroon tayo ng sustained citizen participation.
Yes.
Now, it will ask me, have this been done? Yes, it was done during our time under the audit of Typhoon Yolanda.
Okay.
And there is a policy in COA.
Yes, and Commissioner Heidi, meron nga mga nagsasabi that this whole mess about the flood control projects and DPWH could not have happened kung ginawa daw ng COA yung trabaho niya. Do you agree with that?
Mabigat yan Mabigat yan. Madaling sabihin yan. And those saying these things, hindi masyadong naiintindihan yung ano. If you're an auditor, alam natin, nang an audit is not a matter of hindi natin pwedeng sabihin na, uy, lahat ng kalokohan ay madidiscover. Hindi ganon, ano? Kailangan tingnan natin yung ano ng isang ano, yun nga, yung pinaliwanag natin na lines of defense. Hindi lang COA ang dapat sisihin. First line of defense, ano ang ginawa ng mga project engineers na nanggawa ng plans and specifications niyan, nung bid items niyan. Remember, Atty. Karen, meron ng umamin na ay oo, totoo ho, ano to, under design.
Yes.
Under design,
Oo.
okay. And then overpriced ang items, di ba? Anong ginawa ng second line, yung supervisor? Naandyan yung supposedly magre-review niyan, di ba? Naandyan yung mga tinatawag nating other control, like halimbawa, di ba meron silang quality assurance?
Oo, yes.
Di ba
Quality
meron silang
assurance
tinatawag na
units.
inspectorate, di ba? And then yung third line of defense, yung internal audit, di ba? And then, yung internal audit mo, nakatutok lang talaga sa DPWH eh. Unlike ng COA na nakatutok ka sa lahat. So, ang fourth, yung commission and audit. However, hindi natin kayang i-exclude sa responsibility ang commission and audit. Pero hindi natin pwedeng sabihin na, kung ginawa ng COA yung, hindi nangyayari yan. Kasi the truth is, the commission and audit, the auditors, there are many auditors who are doing their part. And I will explain, meron nga mga disallowances eh. Kaya lang, Atty. Karen, ano nangyayari sa disallowances? Wala lang, nandun lang, di ba? And remember, Atty. Karen, we've been filing cases, di ba? We've been doing audit reports. Yung mga audit reports na yan is sinasubmit sa Kongreso at sa Senado, pati sa Presidente. Ang tanong, may nagbabasa ba? Wala yata.
Yung mga COA reports yun po.
Pangalawa, yung audit reports na yan ay pinapadala sa ombudsman para sa fact-finding and determination of gaano katagal para masabi nating mag-send ng deterrence effect. So, while I'm not washing hands, although 10 years na akong wala dyan, at hindi rin ko rin sinasabi na ipinagtatanggol ang commission, gusto ko lang gawing pantay, Walang isang government agency or isang institution that can effectively prevent corruption. And let me remind you, nandyan lahat ng controls, yung lines of defense nandyan, unfortunately, hindi sila nag-work. And therefore, we have to improve the oversight.
Yes. And Commissioner Heidi, as a former COA commissioner yourself, how serious is the revelation that COA Commissioner Lipana, whose wife also has a construction company, na mukhang merong intention to really conceal this fact because she used her maiden name doon sa kumpanya? Is this a clear conflict of interest?
It is a clear conflict of interest. At saka, Atty. Karen, let me just ang puhunan ng COA yung integridad, objectivity, independence, and credibility. Kaya sabi ko, paano tayo mag-o-audit ngayon? Ay, gaya niyan, lahat-lahat na lang ay sinisisi, ay commission and audit. I've been there, at nakita ko na the same system na kung saan ako nag-work is the same system that we have now, di ba? So, ang puntos ko ay, given the existing controls, given the different corruption and opportunities and vulnerabilities, and a very lax control environment, kahit sinong ilagay mo dyan, matutukso at matutukso. So ang kailangan talaga ay i-increase natin yung tinatawag nating deterrence na, pag ginawa mo yan, makukulong ka at mawawalan ka ng dignidad, nakakahiya, nakakadire. Yun yung pinakamatindi. But hindi natin magawa yan eh.
Yeah. Eh ngayon, ano po yung dapat na gawing hakbang with respect to this conflict of interest that was discovered with COA Commissioner Lipana? Dapat ba mag-resign siya because ang COA Commissioner is an impeachable officer, meaning yung pag-remove sa kanya is by impeachment? Palagay niyo po ba dapat kusa na lang siyang mag-resign?
Well, Atty. Karen, alam mo, eto sa loobin ko lang dapat hindi ako yung tinatanong dyan di ba? Dahil I am out of the commission for the past 10 years. While I may have my own opinion, ang tingin ko ay dapat it should be the head of the agency who will be saying, okay, para mabawi natin yung trust and confidence, para mabawi natin yung tiwala ng mamamayan, ito ang aking ipinag-uutos, di ba? Dapat ganon. However, since tinatanong mo ako at ito ay ang aking opinion, sa akin alang-alang man lang sa napakaraming matitino sa loob ng COA at alang-alang man lang sa napakahabang panahon na iningatan natin ang pangalan ng komisyon. Dapat siguro na magkusang loob na i-subject yung sarili niya at magsabi na eto ang aking gagawin, open ako sa investigation at kung kailangan na resign ay di ganun na nga. No? I do not want to be the one saying, oy mag-ano ka, because that will be too much. I'm already outside of the organization. And as I have said, I am only providing my voice and my face to those people inside who are still doing what should be done. Ang akin lang sigurong hinanakit or mensahe ay ito, may senior management sa Commission on Audit May mga assistant commissioners. Hindi naman enough na na-promote lang. Kailangan talaga, you need to ask the hard questions. You need to exact accountability. You need to preserve the integrity and dignity of the commission. Bago magsalita yung mga nasa labas, yung nasa loob muna. Ang siste kasi nito, Karen, talagang ako yung binubugbog at sasabihin, bakit ka pa-interview ng pa-interview? But as you have said, natuwa ako at nabanggit mo yun. Kung pwede nga lang, wag na magpa-interview. But for the sake ng mga maliliit na taga-COA na nagsasabing, naku ma'am, hiyang-hiya po kami mag-audit, ni magsuot ng jacket na may COA, hindi namin magawa kasi baka ho kami makarinig ng masasakit na salita at kami po'y pumatol. For their sake, nagsasalita tayo. But ang challenge ko really, the senior management of the Commission on Audit, no? You are not there. You are not simply promoted as assistant commissioners for nothing. You have to have your stand and you have to ask the hard question.
And Commissioner Heidi, you were around nung nagkaroon ng PDAF scandal. How would you compare yung time na may PDAF scandal? May mga na-discovery rin ba kayong red flags during that time compared to what is now being revealed in this flood control issue?
Well, of course, parehas yung mga Attorney Karen, the same people, di ba? Ang masasabi lang natin, itong investigasyon ngayon, ang ganda na nangyayari, may public scrutiny and exposure, di ba? So yung hinahanap namin na follow the money and go for the wins, nandito lahat sa nangyayari ngayon, di ba? Noon kasi pag fina-follow namin yung money, from the time na nakita namin yung check and disbursement voucher, syempre titingnan mo lahat yun, to the time na pag sinabi mong follow the money, makikita mo dapat kanino pumunta yung cheque nung na-encash, di ba? Blanco kami dun Walang whistleblower or may whistleblower, walang masyadong dokumentong na ibigay, etc. Dito meron Meron ang nagsabing, ako po ang nag-encash. Dinala ko po sa bangko, in-encash ko, nilagay ko po sa kahon, diniliver po dito. Complete yung line, na-follow mo yung tinatawag nating follow the money, na-complete mo yung from the government transaction and then how it became a misappropriation, di ba? Dahil napunta sa bulsa ng iba, di ba? So this is the perfect for any investigation. On the other hand, yung parang namin noon, talagang napakasipag ng team. Hanggang ngayon, pinapasalamatan ko sila. Ito yung tipong doon na natutulog sa opisina, doon na naglalaba. Alam mo kung bakit? Napakadami ng documentations na kailangan namin gawin. At yun naman ang nakakalungkot, di ba? Pagdating sa court, ayun ang desisyon. Ang nakulong, yung mga chief of staff, yung isa, convicted, pero hindi naman convicted. Ang sabi, kailangan ibalik yung pera, pero At ito rin siguro yung problema na gusto kong sabihin. Alam niyo kung gaano kasakit yung nag-audit ka na talagang pagod na pagod ka. And then, of course, sasabihin niyo, yan ang trabaho mo. True enough. And then after, ikaw yung magte-testify with all the pressures, with all the threats. And then after, magdi-dismiss yung kaso. Masakit yan. At mas masakit kung makikita mong years after, sila na naman. And ito yung mas masakit. Wala silang kayang sabihin kung hindi totoo yan. I will have to blah, 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 blah. Walang ibang sagot kung hindi yung pagtanggi. So, pabalik-balik tayo. Nakakalungkot, di ba, Atty. Karen?
Yes, and meron pong suggestion si former Finance Secretary Cesar Purisima na dapat daw i-phase out na lang yung mga 500 pesos and 1,000 peso bills. Considering na narinig na natin sa Senate Blue Ribbon Committee hearing na ang pag-deliver nitong mga kickbacks ay in the form of cash. Palagay ba makakatulong na i-demonetize itong mga 1,000 peso bills so that they're forced to somehow bring this out into circulation?
Well, una, ang sagot ko dyan, ano yan depende sa timing. Di ba pag mag-e-election, nagdi-demonetize para hindi magamit yung mga pera sa pambili ng boto. Ganon din yan I-demonetize nila para hindi magamit at kumbaga, masayang yung kinuha. But, ito yung tanong ko, after na may demonetize mo, iba na yung ano ngayon? Hindi na ba yan gagawin? Di ba? We're going back to the same system. Unless na lang, may nagsasuggest nga, somebody sent me this message na, yung different currency, na parang ito lang ang gagamitin sa gobyerno.
Para ma-identify. Oo.
Yes. And para walang value pagdating sa labas, di ba?
Yes.
At saka na-identify mo, di ba? But as I have said, if you will take a look at our system and our processes, from the first line of defense to the fourth line of defense, embedded yan with controls. At hindi natin sasabihin, nagkukulang tayo sa batas. It is really the culture, diba? Sa mga auditors, ang tawag natin dyan, pag tinignan natin yung COSOQ, ang concentration is on the control activities, pero wala sa control environment. And let me highlight that a bit, Yung bank manager, nung in-encash yung cheque, hindi ba nagtaas ang kilay o nagtanong? Nung yung pera pakalat-kalat dun sa opisina at nakabox, wala man lang bang nagtanong? Yung nag-process ng documents, yung sabi nating first line of defense, bakit parang ka-award lang eto na, meron ng notice sa panatapos, meron na kaagad accomplishment, parang imposible ata. Maraming tao ang dinaanan, from first line to third line of defense. Walang nagsalita.
Yeah.
Diba?
Oo.
So, ang ibig sabihin ko, kahit anong galing ng sistema, kung merong tinatawag nating connivance at namamanipulate ang sistema, hindi tayo talaga makakaano sa ating mga tinatawag na katiwalian.
Oo, marami talagang kailangang ayusin. Thank you so much, Commissioner Heidi Mendoza, and we appreciate that you granted this interview.
Ay, always naman, Karen. Lagi niyo ako ini-interview nung nag-run ako, di ba? So, I owe you that. Kaya lang, talaga lang, buti hindi na tayo inuubo. So, we'll always look forward to any opportunity na makatulong.
Yeah.
Maraming salamat, Atty. Karen, at maraming salamat, Bilyonaryo.
Up next, we'll have former Senate President Frank Drilon when At the Forefront returns after a short break. Welcome back at the Forefront. Now to talk about budget insertions and other issues facing the Senate, we have with us former Senate President Frank Drilon. Good morning, Senator Frank.
Hi, good morning, Karen. Thank you for having me today.
It's always a pleasure to have you here, Senator Frank. Let's go to the change of leadership that happened just recently. Nagulat ba kayo that there was a change in leadership in the Senate?
No, I was not, because there was so much talk already about the conflict between the Senate President then, Escudero, and Romualdez, talk in the coffee shop is that there will be change in leadership.
But now that the name of Senator Cheese Escudero has come out, even supposedly his bagman, it's part of this flood control issue. Do you think more senators' names will come out? Kasi parang na-mention ni Senator Ping Lacson na almost all senators are involved.
I do not know. It will not add any peso to our national budget if there is another change in leadership. What we should be concerned about is that we seem to insist on legislating morality. In this day and age, I see a lot of immorality in the way public affairs are being conducted. And in this mess, the mess that we are in today, I put the blame squarely on both Congress and Malacanang. And I hope they hear the anger of people in what they see. You see, Karen, let me take a little time. The budget is of three phases. Number one, the preparation. This is when the National Expenditure Program is prepared and the cabinet members submit their budget for the ensuing year. Number two, the authorization. It is when the Congress goes over the National Expenditure Program submitted by the President and would pass the General Appropriations Bill. in the third aspect is the so-called authorization or execution, when the president would have to would veto or approve and approve the releases. So in these three phases, in the preparation, in the authorization, and in the execution, so much corruption has taken place. In execution, in the preparation, you know, during my time, I never hear of, and I was Senate President, I never heard of the so-called leadership fund, where the DPWH would allocate funds for the heads of the chambers for their pork barrel. This is, and here, there is already a pork barrel being inserted in the National Expenditure
Oh, I
Program.
heard that also in the Blue Ribbon Committee hearing. Yung tawag nila yung allocation daw per congressman. And there was
Yes.
even a complaint na bakit daw pag party list mas maliit yung allocation. And
No, that comes in the authorization when they debate on the budget in Congress. Because the way it works, Karen, and I speak with authority, when there is when the BICAM comes, the House of Representatives and the Senate would agree how much should be allotted to Congress in terms of the sum total of the pork barrel, how much will be allotted to the Senate, given the fact that there are just 24 senators. So, in the authorization stage, there is the insertion of pork barrel. Pangalawa na yan, in the preparation of the National Expenditure Program, you have leadership fund. These are I just heard this recently when the DBM, I think, the DPWH called the Senate President's office and said, you have an allocation of 500 million for us leadership fund. Tell us what are your projects which we should insert. So doon pa lang, mayroon ng pork barrel. Pagdating sa Kongreso, doon sa General Appropriations Bill or GAB, mayroon na naman, sisingatan naman ng insertion or amendments as the so-called.
So, Senate President Frank, you're saying during your time, meron ng ganitong concept of a pork barrel na pinaghahati-hatian sa level ng Congress,
Yes.
lower chamber, and sa upper chamber sa Senado din. So, it was explicit na merong pork barrel?
Yes, Karen, let's not kid ourselves. There is pork barrel, and this is not a monopoly of the Philippine Congress. Everywhere, in America, in London, there is pork barrel. The issue is the proper execution of the pork barrel, of the allocation. And that's why I said the third issue is authorization. I'm sorry, the third issue is execution. When the General Appropriations Bill is presented to the President for approval, and this is where the President can exercise his power by exercising what we call the for later release. And this is what I'm saying. The remedy, the immediate remedy for the mess that we have today, is basically discipline, political will, and use of the power to veto and withhold release of the funds which are not in the National Expenditure Program. The National Expenditure Program is a program of the national government to move our economy forward, so that the projects there are supposed to be to help the economy grow. Now, you remove those, as the Congress did, and insert it with your pork barrel, so you have no National Expenditure Program. It is mangled by Congress. So what is the remedy? The remedy is for the President to exercise his veto power, or if not, exercise the discretion to withhold releases and mark the insertions for later release until it is examined and the priorities are met. We don't need all of these debates you see on TV. Of course, what is the debates that we see on TV or the committee hearings are needed for public awareness. But just to make the public aware that this is happening, and therefore something must be done. But there are enough laws, enough policies to address the mess that we are in today. I would repeat, there are enough laws. You know, our problem, Karen, is
But
that...
are there really enough laws that are implemented properly? Because na-mention na po ni Senator Kiko na kung dati pa daw, nung time ng PDAF scandal, ay hindi napakawalan yung mga may sala, then
Yes,
we
that's
probably
what-
won't find ourselves in this
That was
situation
what I was
again.
leading to. The failure to prosecute, the lack of enforcement, the impunity is a result of our failure to implement the rule of law. What is the rule of law? It is to put fear in the hearts and minds of the people that if they do not follow the rules of conduct as defined in law, they will suffer. Pero ngayon, nobody suffers, nobody is scared,
Yeah.
and
Well,
therefore
Senator-
the rule of law is ignored.
Yes, well, Senator Bato de la Rosa said during one of the Blue Ribbon Committee hearings na kung gawin bang death sentence yung penalty for corruption, will that work? Will that scare people?
You can impose death sentence 100 times. If you don't carry it out, nothing will happen. So the point is, you be able to execute the laws properly, not the penalties, because you can provide all kinds of penalties. There are enough laws. You think who do you think would want to be imprisoned for life in a reclusion perpetual judgment? But nobody is afraid because there is no fear that you will be punished for the violation of law, and that therefore there is a failure to inculcate in the minds of people that we live in a society where the rule of law is important. They just being ignored, so we are in this mess today.
Yeah. Well, Senator Frank, I'll ask you not only as a former Senate President, but also as a lawyer. What do you think should be done for us to establish the links between yung mga bagmen na tinatawag and the senators and congressmen themselves who are involved? Because in the past, we had Senator Bong Revilla na na-indict, pero in the end, ang na-convict lang ay yung kanyang staff or aide na tumanggap ng pera, whereas later on siya ay na-acquit. Pero yung aide niya yung nakulong at eventually namatay na sa kulungan.
The effectivity and effectiveness of our justice system can be the subject of another program for you, because really our justice system is not working. It's not working at all. That is why you see all of this. You know, Karen, when I was Secretary of Justice, I know that we have shortcomings. So we know that what is important is that we must inculcate in the minds of people to respect the law. And one of the ways to respect the law is through putting across the message that if you commit a violation, you'll be punished. So I prosecuted the prominent cases so that it gets media attention and people will be made aware that, uy, nakulong pa na itong si Mayor Antonio Sanchez, huwag natin gawin yung kanyang ginawa. That kind of mindset is no longer there today.
Yeah. Paano po naman kasi magkakaroon ng ganung mindset? We saw that some of the people implicated, some of the senators implicated in that PDAF scandal were eventually acquitted.
That's why I'm saying. That's why, this is not a problem that we can solve overnight. To me, our justice system is kaput. And that is why I go back to my theory and my premise. What you need is an effective enforcement of the law in order that you can manage and control the behavior of people so that they will not act with impunity. If nobody fears that he will be incarcerated, and he's incarcerated, you're citing examples of past public officials who were acquitted, nobody is afraid. Magaling ng abogado mo. Pwede kang hindi mo parusahan. But that is why, to me, Karen, the present mess that we are in, I lay the blame on both Malacanang and Congress, because Malacanang has all the instruments in order to prevent this thing from happening. As we are talking today, I hope they're doing it, as I earlier suggested, that there should be a marking of for later release. All those insertions and amendments. Why? Because those amendments were not vetted did not pass through examination by our economic managers, but rather they were just placed there with malice aforethought to make money. And therefore, there was no examination of this, there was no scrutiny of this proposed expenditure program.
Yeah.
And therefore, the president should hold them for later release and examine it one by one so that it will be vetted. Those who are really serve no purpose should not be released.
Yeah. Dr. Tony Liachon said that the president cannot feign ignorance.
Sorry?
Dr. Tony Liachon said the president cannot feign ignorance when it comes to signing this corrupt 2025 budget. Do you agree with that statement?
He cannot feign ignorance. I agree. But also, he has a staff that should provide him with the proper advice. Karen, this is a, $6 billion budget? How many items are there? Thousands upon thousands. You cannot expect the president to look at it line by line. That is why you have a DBM. That is why you have the line departments. I would rather place the burden on the staff who advises the president. Why did the DBM not advise the president? There are 1,001, there are thousands of insertions which were not vetted upon. Why did they allow only a veto of measly, I don't know how many billions, 20 or something, out of 400 billion insertions? That if, such a small percentage. I lay the blame here on the DBM. Why did they not scrutinize and advise the president? And as a immediate resolution, maybe they have no more time to go over it one by one, but therefore, all of those items which were not in the National Expenditure Program originally submitted must be marked for later release and then go over them.
Well, what is the accountability of DBM here when it comes also to the disbursements? They were issuing SAROS kahit na apparently meron ng mga anomalies.
Yes, but yes, they have also, may pananagutan din sila. Why were they releasing? But the releases, they will also say, in-approve yan ng Department Secretary. He interposed no objection. They were the ones who requested us to issue a SARO. So, magtuturoan yan eh. That's what I'm saying. That is why I'm saying this mess is the responsibility of both the President, Malacanang, and Congress, and the congressmen.
Senator Frank, meron po naging controversy din dun sa paghanap dun sa small committee report. During your time as Senate President, meron din po ba kayong small committee where in fact under this administration parang nagkasistema na apart from the BICAM, meron pang small committee na nagfa-finalize ng budget?
The small committee is made necessary by circumstances. How many thousand lines are there in the General Appropriations Act? And the BICAM gets a copy of the General Appropriations Bill 1 week before the deadline. Because then, if you do not have a budget by the end of December, you have a new budget. You reenact the new budget. So that is made necessary because of the circumstance. You know, Karen, when you sit in the BICAM, and I have sat there several times, you would have about 50 people looking at the budget. Why? Because everyone would try to guard their own BICAM, their own pork barrel, their own insertions. So you have about 50 people there. You have about a week to finish the budget. Do you think that realistically you can finish the budget within that time? So what you do is to resort to the so-called small committee so that a small committee would do the examination and submit to the BICAM. Theoretically, and I underscore theoretically, the BICAM is supposed to review the small committee report. In truth and in fact, nothing of such thing happened. They just accept it. Now, but again, I'm not trying to justify it, but the BICAM also is left with no choice because the deadline is a week from there. So what is my proposal? My proposal is for the President, starting now and starting in the next year budget, to mark as for later release all items in the appropriations law which are not included in the National Expenditure Program, and there's that not only for DPWH, agriculture, education, etc., etc., etc. Mark it all. Basta wala doon sa original proposal ng Presidente, barakhan mo ng for later release. And then, bago mo i-release, tingnan nyo kung tama ba ito.
Yeah. But Senator Frank, paano naman pipigilin yung parang insertions at the National Expenditure Program level? Because Senator Lacson disclosed that someone, the Undersecretary for Planning daw, called Senator Tito Soto to offer na maglagay na doon sa NEP, doon sa National Expenditure Program. So that's a form of insertion din. Nauna lang, pinasok lang sa NEP.
Yes, how can you prevent that? You cannot. You cannot because of greed. Naririnig natin, ilang daang bilyon ang sinisaksak as insertion. That is why my proposal is this. Mark it all for later release.
Lahat. Hindi ba maapektuhan ng speed naman ng pag-implement ng projects po?
No, ang maapektuhan are the projects which are pork barrels. Because then, these are the projects where you will not release funds unless it is necessary, unless it is valid. Mark my word, not all pork barrels are bad. Not because the DPM, the DPWH, the cabinet would not have a monopoly of what is good for the country. And that
so
is
you're
the
saying legislators should have a role in saying what should be in the budget. Kahit na the Supreme Court has already ruled previously that pork barrel is unconstitutional.
Karen, you read the Supreme Court wrongly. What the Supreme Court ruled as invalid is participation in the post-enactment.
Yes.
In the post-enactment. They did not say that you cannot amend. They did not tell Congress you cannot insert, because that is the role of Congress. You're involved in policy making. A policy would have to be funded in order to be effective. And the Congress is a policy-making body and the guardian of the purse. So if you deprive Congress of all of this, you might as well abolish Congress now. And you cannot win a legal argument. Congress will win the argument that the General Appropriations Bill is nothing but a law and we can introduce amendments. But what the executive can do is, number one, as I said, hold on to the release that's valid. Let them insert, but hold on to the release until you validate the correctness of the list. Number two, be sure that in the execution, it is properly done. And this is where our ombudsman, our COA, should play an important role, that they should see to it that the implementation is consistent with law. That is how it should
So
be.
I suppose what we have here is a difference in opinion as to what constitutes pork barrel. Like the pork barrel that is not allowed is where legislators have a role in the post-enactment na parang nag-i-implement
That's
sila.
correct.
Yeah, but how will you address yung sinabi ni Undersecretary Bobby Bernardo sa Blue Ribbon that pagka daw hindi nasusunod yung mga congressmen, iniipit sila? Ay pahihirapan or even sila pa yung mafa-file ng kaso. So it's a form of controlling na ako yung naglagay niyan sa budget. So sa implementation, you should give me something.
If you have a working president, if you have a working executive secretary, you pick up the phone, tell him, Mr. Executive Secretary, Congressman so-and-so is pressuring me. I have no way to resist the pressure. You tell the president. You exercise judgment in telling this congressman, telling the speaker, hoy, hindi po pwede yung ginagawa mo.
Do you think practical po na solusyon
Of course.
yan?
I have been there for 24
Yeah.
years. When somebody in Malacanang calls and says, Pare, hindi pwede yan. You think they will insist? So, it can be done. You cannot legislate morality.
Yeah.
You know, there will always be people like that. We're not in a perfect society.
But I suppose that also depends on the leadership style. During your time as Senate President, that was the time where the DPWH Secretary was Babe Singson.
Yes.
And he said he was able to limit yung mga tinatawag natin siguro na parang kinukuha from the projects to just 10%. How was he able to do that?
It's a question of leadership. That is why I am proposing, I said, mark it all FLR, exercise political will to say, even if it is in the budget, I will not release the funds. Because that is part of the power of the president, not to release the funds. And I am not releasing the funds because this project is for no purpose except to line up your pockets with corruption. So there is a way. That is why, to me, the key is discipline, political will.
Do you see that as existing, as factors that exist under this administration?
Unfortunately, I don't see the discipline. That's why I place the blame squarely on Malacanang. Hindi naman nila, they imagine the president approved almost as passed the budget. And the General Appropriations Bill contains hundreds of billions. And before I forget, Karen, part of the execution is I saw your guest earlier, the
COA Commissioner
COA
Heidi,
Commissioner,
yes.
and the Anti-Money Laundering Council. I crafted the law, and I was the Senate President when the Anti-Money Laundering Law was passed. Is it effective? I asked the Central Bank Governor and the Anti-Money Laundering Council, make public how much were you able to freeze. And I hear coffee shop talk that, while, let's say, 100 accounts were suspicious, you only were able to freeze 5-10%. So what happened to the 90%? I challenge AMLC, I hope you're listening, make public how many accounts were suspicious that were supposed to be frozen. How many accounts were actually frozen and how much was frozen. Because here, again, part of the enforcement of the law, if you cannot even freeze the accounts of the crooks, how do you propose to solve this issue?
Yeah. As sinabi na po ni, I think it was DOJ that announced sinong mga senators they've requested for their assets to be frozen, and the name of former Senate President Chis Escudero was mentioned, as well as yung mga nadawit na names din, Senator Jingo Estrada, Senator Joel Villanueva. So are you saying mukhang hindi pa na-freeze yung mga assets or accounts up to now?
Yeah, Karen, let's make it clear. I am referring to those where the decision to freeze was already made. There is a decision to freeze the account of Juan de la Cruz. Juan de la Cruz, Pedro de la Cruz, the two of them. They have 100 accounts each. That's 200 accounts. How many of the 200 accounts holding funds were frozen?
Yeah.
The decision to freeze was already there, but the enforcement is ineffective.
Yes. What prevents them from freezing those accounts? What prevents the Anti-Money Laundering Council?
You can theorize that it's anywhere from collusion, corruption, or inefficiency. That is why those accounts were not frozen.
Do you think the ICI, the Independent Investigative Committee on Infrastructure, would have the power to freeze accounts and change things?
The power to freeze accounts is with the Anti-Money Laundering Council. Because, Karen, the power to freeze accounts is a very dangerous power. Abuse that, and that's the end of your banking system. And therefore, when we were crafting the law, when we wrote the law, we made sure that there are safeguards so that these abuse will not happen. But on the other hand, there was lack of due diligence. I mean, I'm telling you, that's why I'm challenging the Anti-Money Laundering Council through your program. Make public how many accounts were frozen or were suspicious, how much did it contain, how much was frozen. Because it is, from my understanding, it's very negligible.
And that won't violate the bank secrecy law. When they say how much did the
I am not
accounts
talking
contain?
about individual accounts. I'm talking about general.
Okay. So no visibility as to the amounts.
No visibility. No, there is no violation because you are not revealing the account of anyone. I am asking them as a policy maker how much was frozen and how many were covered.
As the author of the anti-money laundering law, what would you change now that we've heard the revelations of some of the witnesses in the Blue Ribbon Committee na these are in the billions that are being delivered to the lawmakers who are getting kickback. So that's in cash. Paano naman matitrace yan kung wala sa banking system?
You know, Karen, it's that on diligence is important. You know, our tendency is to say, gumawa tayo ng batas. Hindi po ganun ang solution every time. As I said, if you have discipline, if you have diligence, and you have political will, you could prevent this from happening. You talk about the Anti-Money Laundering Council, diligence, all right. Under the law, under the law, the banks are supposed to submit suspicious transactions. As you know, as a lawyer, you have suspicious transactions. But I asked the question to the Anti-Money Laundering Council, what do you do with these reports? Are you doing anything? Why do we have the Alice Go? Why do we have all of this? Can you imagine, Karen, the land bank would allow cash withdrawals?
Yeah, that's what Commissioner Heidi was also talking about
cash
earlier.
withdrawals.
Yung mga external
So,
environment.
Do you need the law to prevent this? No. The central bank has enough regulatory power to say, as they are saying now, if it's 500,000, more than 500,000, it cannot be a cash transaction. Why are these crooks resorting to cash transactions? To cut the trace. So it's you don't need the law. That's already that can be done immediately, like tomorrow, as they did. You know,
Yeah.
they said no longer available in cash. But by the way, I question Karen. The central bank said if you withdraw 500,000 and above, you cannot withdraw it in cash. What about deposits? Are they allowing deposits in cash of over 500,000 or more?
They allow it, except ma-flag lang daw. Dapat as
Sorry?
sa AMLA. Dapat ma-flag lang pag more than 500,000 pesos.
Yes.
I think that's
Are
under our current system.
But if it is not a suspicious transaction,
yes.
then all you do is provide information. But there is a so-called suspicious transaction reports where the deposit or withdrawal is not consistent with the business of the depositor. In other words, if he's just an ordinary it's just an ordinary contractor, how the hell did he have 400 million in business? So,
Well, ano po sa palagay nyo ang mangyayari if Zaldico comes back? How essential is his information when it comes to the 2025 budget, considering he was the chairman of the Appropriations Committee? At ilang beses na rin ngayon na mention ang pangalan po ni Congressman Zaldico in the Blue Ribbon hearings coming from the witnesses.
what's your question?
What do you think is
Should be done?
Yes. Paano po siya pwedeng mapabalik dito sa Pilipinas?
Okay, first question, paano siya pabalik? Cancel his passport. But there's a process to follow. You go to court, have the passport canceled. It cannot be done by the DFA alone. You have to go to court and get an order to have it canceled. Having canceled the passport, he is now an undocumented alien. And you can request the country where he is in through the international police to bring him back, consider him as an undocumented alien, and bring him back to the country of origin, in this particular case, in the Philippines. The next thing they should do is freeze all his accounts. Freeze all his accounts and build up a case against him. You know, Karen, you're a lawyer. All of this talk in media will not stand in court. Statements like, I was asked by Congressman so-and-so to deliver this to Congressman so-and-so. That's hearsay, you know. When you get to court and prosecute, that is hearsay.
But
that is no.
isn't it not hearsay with respect to the witnesses who personally delivered the cash doon sa bahay? Pag
It
na-establish
is
na
not.
bahay
It
nila.
is not. I am
Yeah.
just talking about that. I'm talking about other
The other
testimonies.
types of testimonies, yes. But in this case, do you think there's enough to build a case against Zaldico based on what we've heard so far in the hearings?
Well, at the very least, on a probable cause, there is enough in my mind. That is why the Vizcayas should not be allowed to be state witnesses.
Why? Why is that?
Because then they can claim, in the first place, they're not qualified. Who qualifies as state witness? Number one, he must not be the most guilty.
Yeah.
That's one. Number two, the testimony is necessary in order to convict the accused. In this particular case, I don't think that that he is the least guilty. The Discayas are the most guilty.
How can they be the most guilty when they're not able to put the budget?
Yeah,
For
well,
the,
yeah,
at
I am
mukhang yung
sure, yes.
project proponents po ang pinakamalaking nakukuha.
So they should not be allowed to become state witnesses. And by the way, it is not the Department of Justice who technically converts an accused into a state witness.
It's the court.
It is the court.
Yeah.
The Witness Protection Program only authorizes the grant of protection and other benefits to the witness. But before the witness is entitled to that benefit and before he is admitted to the Witness Protection Program, he must be discharged as a state witness and discharged as an accused and converted into a state witness. And only the court can do that, not Secretary
Not DOJ.
Remulla.
Yes. But Senator Frank, talaga bang sila ang most guilty when they're just contractors? Because at the end of the day, yes, they look like to be the pinakamalaking contractor or isa sa mga pinakamalaking contractor. But the contractors, and I'm not just talking about the Discayas, generally, they only get around 8 to 10%, whereas the proponents get 25 to 30% of the budget for a project. So hindi ba yun ang most guilty? And they're the ones that actively put the budget doon, sila yung naglalagay din ng insertions.
They are an indispensable principle. Without their cooperation, this would not have happened if it is not for the fact that they use their license in order to win the bid and do shenanigans with the execution of project so that they will make money. So they are to be. They cannot be qualified as state witness.
Are you optimistic that the ICI will do a better job in terms of building cases against those that are responsible for this flood control scandal?
I proceed on the basis of regularity in the performance of the functions. I would give a chance to the people there. They are of proven integrity. And I hope that given all the powers that they have, they should be able to do it. But I still favor that a law is passed creating the independent commission. Why? Because they are not independent of the president. When you say independent commission, independent from whom? Independent from Congress, independent from the president. And what does it require? Right now, Karen, they can be fired at any time by the president. The president can withhold funds from them. So what is the independence? They must enjoy fiscal autonomy. They must enjoy security of tenure in order to be truly independent.
But that would take a long time.
Yes,
Pag
in the
pinasal pa ng
meantime,
batas,
in the meantime, I rely on the reputation of these people. Babe Singson, I've known for years. He's the goddamn most honest person I've seen in the government service. I know Justice Reyes. I know him well. I know his family. I've been lawyers with his family since 1970.
Well, since we're out of time na po, Senator Frank Drilon, what is your comment kung sakaling si Vico Soto ang ipalit kay Mayor Benji Magalong? May ganun kasing chismis na baka daw si Vico Soto ang ipalit as the advisor to the ICI.
Why do you need an advisor? Why cannot the President Commission do it? What do you need an advisor for?
Yeah, good point. Okay. Thank you so much, Senator Frank Drilon. We hope to have you back here again.
Just call.
Yes. Thank you so much. From red flags and audits to billion-peso insertions, the depth of corruption is mind-bogglingly perpetrated without conscience. Clean governance depends on the Filipinos' collective will as people. Laging tutukan at maging updated sa Blue Ribbon hearing ni Senator Ping Lacson. Manatiling galit at mag-demand for accountability. Be timely informed, be insightful of the news. Always stay at the forefront. Join us again tomorrow for conversations on issues that matter. This is Attorney Karen Jimeno. Thank you for spending your hour with us.